Welcome back, everybody. It is a cold and chilly morning in Arizona, so what better time than to stay inside and do a little designing and 3D printing? After the last video where I made the ladder feet out of the flexible TPU, I decided while it's a whole lot of fun to make giant Hulk statues and Fallout 4 bobbleheads, and it is fun, that I was going to start a series making things that are actually useful. People have asked me, you know, how do I make things? I can print things off. I've got the printer working right. It's great. I printed things off Thingiverse, but how do I make my own things? And while I have done a couple of videos in the past on how to make things in Fusion or Fusion 360, and you can use any 3D program, but I thought I would start a series of videos where we make useful things and walk you through from start to finish. The first thing, and I want to start really simple for you guys who've never used 3D software before, 3D design type software before, CAD CAM or anything like that. And it really can seem foreign and strange at first. So I want to start with something really simple. So this has been sitting on my desk. I've had this thing for probably a decade or longer. It is a paperclip dispenser. It has a magnet at the top. You pull paper clips out, and the magnet causes it to draw the next ones up. And there's a cup under here, or there used to be a cup under there. Mine went walkabout. So let's make a new cup for it. Let's go into 360. Let's design it, and let's make it. And it all it does is this part here, this part that extends from there to there. It has a slight taper to it. So all the cup it does is wedge itself down into the cup so it doesn't fall out, which apparently didn't work on mine. So first thing I do is I get a piece of paper and I draw myself a very simple diagram. And there's my cup. Here's the 68 millimeter. That's an inside diameter. I didn't mark it, but I know. And I arbitrarily chose to make it 50 millimeters high. And I also noted down here that the top has a 1 millimeter taper that is 12 millimeters in depth. So now that we have our dimensions, and I don't have to keep measuring because I keep forgetting what they are, let's switch to let's get the Hulk and the bobblehead out of the way, and let's switch over to my design software, which is Fusion, and let's make this thing. I've got Fusion already open, and you may see here that I have a finished one already done that I have saved, but let's make it from scratch. So in Fusion, when you start designing something, you need to sketch. Everything is started from a 2D sketch, but you need something to sketch on. So right now we have a blank screen, so there's nothing to sketch on. You sketch either on a face of a part or a plane. Are no parts, so we're going to sketch on a plane. So you click the Create Sketch button, and it shows us our planes, left, right, top, and bottom. Actually, they're all four because we can use the bottom one, that we can use the top face of it or the bottom face of it. So let's pick the top face. And the reason I like the top face is because the top of the top face. The reason I like that is because 3D printers build from the bottom up. So I like to design from the bottom up whenever I can. And it makes more sense to me. Plus, if you put it on Thingiverse or a year later you go to print it again, it's going to, when you load it into Cura, it's going to be in the correct orientation to print. So I always try and design it the way I want people to print it, or I want myself to print it a year later. So here's Fusion 360. We're ready to go. We're ready to make a sketch. By the way, Fusion 360 has a free version for those of you for startups, and you'll see mine up here. It says startup license for hobbyists, for students, for educators, things like that. And it's really not that expensive if you're making any money with it. I wish I was, but I'm really not. So first thing we need the bottom of this thing. So I'm going to come down to sketch, and I want a circle, and I want a center diameter circle. And there's two ways to do this in Fusion. There is the old school way where you do everything yourself, And then there's the way where you use a bunch of Fusion shortcuts. I'm going to try both, and I'm going to show you both. So we're going to start with the old school way because that's how I learned. And I think it's a good way to learn because then if the shortcuts and other things fail you or you move to a different program that has them, you know how to do it. So my center diameter circle, I'm going to move my pointer down till it snaps into the center. I'm going to left click and I'm going to drag it out. Now I could just keep dragging till I hit on the size I want, but it's easier for me to type it in because I know what I want. I want a 68 inside diameter and I want a 2 millimeter wall, so it's going to be 72. And you have to hit enter twice to lock it in, and you'll notice my lines are in black. That means the circle is locked. I can't easily change its location or its size by clicking and dragging or moving other things through it. Always try and lock your 2D sketch elements in place. If you can't, you can't, but usually you can, and it'll help you from making stupid mistakes and then not realizing it until you've printed a part and handed it to the customer that it's not right. So now we have a 2D circle. Neat, huh? But we need to drag it into 3D space. And to do that in Fusion, we come up to Create, click Extrude, and over here is our Extrude toolbox. And first thing it asks us is select the profile you want to extrude. We want to extrude this circle. So we're going to click on it. Now you'll see we have an arrow, and over here we can just type in everything we want, but we can just drag the arrow up. I know I want it to be 50 millimeters high. There it is. I can do other things to it. I can put a taper on it, but you know what? We're staying simple today, so let's just click OK. And there is the basis of my cup. It's still a solid cylinder, and of course, solid cylinders aren't going to hold paper clips, so we have to make it hollow. Staying with the old school way, I'm going to click my Create a Sketch button again. And now I'm going to click on the top. Now that I have a surface to work on, I don't need to use the planes anymore. So I'm going to click on my top surface. And now I am going to draw another center diameter circle. Circle, center diameter, and I'm going to go once again to the center, left click, and come out. And I want my inside diameter to be 68. So 68, hit enter twice, and now that circle is locked in black. Now what do I do? Well, now I need to make that thing hollow, don't I? So oh, and look at it. So one thing I do in Fusion every time I come in is I change my view type. So come up here to notice how my cylinder looks kind of janky. At least it does to me. Come up here to the cube in the upper right, right click on it, change faces or change the view from orthographic to perspective with ortho faces. And when I do this, you'll see that cylinder look what I think it should look like. And it's hard to tell the difference on something just like this simple cylinder, but when you start building other things and you have that perspective with ortho fate or that orthographic selected, things just look weird. And when they look weird, I don't like going forward because I'm afraid it's going to print weird. So I like it to look like what I want it to print like. And changing that to perspective with ortho faces gives me that. Okay, so we have now drawn this cylinder. We have another circle inside of it. We need to cut that down into our cylinder to make it hollow. So we're going to come back to Create. We're going to come to Extrude. We're going to click on our new circle. And I don't want to go up because if I go up, it'll do that. I don't want that. I want to cut down in. And there's a couple of ways I could do this. Over here, I could change my distance from a measurement to a point, meaning I could say, hey, cut that all the way down to the bottom, but minus 2 millimeters. But you know what? That's a lot of work. I know what I want. I know I want it 48 millimeters deep. So I'm just going to type 48. And notice the minus sign in front of the 48. The minus sign has to stay there for it to be a cut. Otherwise, it's going to make it 48 tall. So click OK. And now we have our basic cup. If that's all we wanted, we're done. But I want to show you the second way to do it, and then I want to put a little finishing touches on it. So let's go Control Z, and let's undo all the way back to where I don't have a thing. So now I'm going to show you the shortcuts that Fusion 360 gives you. And I like to use the shortcuts when I can, but sometimes when I'm making a complex part and there's 50 or 60 or 70 steps to it, sometimes those shortcuts scare me because it's not sometimes, and I'm probably doing it wrong. Guys at Fusion are probably laughing at me if I say this. When I go back, sometimes those shortcuts aren't as easy for me to modify as my old school way of doing it. One of these days I'll learn why, and I'll see if I can't prevent that. It's only happened to me once or twice. So this is the new Fusion way of doing it, the shortcut way. I am not even going to create a sketch. I'm going to come right to create, and I'm going to say create a cylinder right here. And first thing it asks me is what plane I want to create it on. I want to create it on this bottom plane, and it has the mouse ready for me to go. Let's get this over top better. So click a center point, drag it out. I know I want 72. Hit enter, enter. Now, here is my cylinder. It's got two arrows on it. It's asking me how high and how wide. So let's go up 50 millimeters first. And the diameter is already 72. I typed that in, so I don't need to mess with that arrow. So all I got to do is click OK. And there's my cylinder. Now, here's another neat tool. I can come to modify. So I need to make it hollow. I need to make a cup instead of a solid cylinder out of it. So instead of doing what I did with the circle and the extrude, I'm going to come to modify, and I'm going to click, modify, and shell. Shell lets me make something, a solid object, hollow. So faces, bodies. First thing it wants me to do is select where I want to start my process. I want to do it on this top one, and it asks me inside thickness. So inside thickness is if I can get it, if it's in multiple of fives, I can just drag it. It's not, so I'm going to say 2 millimeters is what I want my walls to be thick, and I'm going to hit enter, and there it is. That may not seem like that much time saving for this one thing, but if I was making something where I needed 20 of these types of things, that adds up into quite a bit of time savings. So there's our basic cup. We could print this and be done, and it would work for our paperclip holder. But I like a few little embellishments on it, so I'm going to say modify and fill it, and I am going to click this bottom edge, and I am going to put a 5 millimeter fillet on it with a constant radius, and click enter. And there's my bottom edge fillet. I like that a lot. I do this on a lot of stuff. I come from, I come from, I'm old enough that I come from a school where I like rounded edges on things, not sharp angles if I can get it. So that's why I do some of this stuff. It's just an appearance thing that I like. So also, since I'm going to try and jam that top piece that I showed you in this, I'm going to fillet this a little bit as well. I could chamfer it. Chamfer would work just as well, but chamfer would leave me another sharp lip. It wouldn't matter, but again, I've kind of fallen in love with fillet. So we're going to say modify and fillet again. We're going to clip, let's zoom in a little bit. We're going to click this inside edge, and I'm going to put a 1 millimeter fillet on that and hit enter, and now we have a 1 millimeter fillet. Now our top part will start easy, and I won't chip it or have to fight with it to get it started. Okay, let's keep going. So, and as you see, I already made one before, but let's save this one. So what we want to do is we want to go up here and click our save button, and we're going to give it a name, and let's call it Paper Clip Cup 2. Because I've already got Paperclip Cup over there, and say save. Now, as soon as the name changes here, I can do this. And there are other ways to do this. I need to save it as an STL to load into Cura, because now it's done. So I could come up here and say make and 3D print, and I could go through all the steps to either send it to a 3D printer or save it as an STL. But there's a shortcut. Right click on its name over here, left click save as STL. I don't use my computer to send data to my printer. I just put it on the flash card and carry it over and do it. So save as STL. I accept all these parameters the way they are. Make sure send to 3D print utility is not checked or it takes you into a whole nother set of screens, and click OK. And now it pops up. What do you want to call it? Where do you want to save it? Paperclip Cup 2 version 1.stl. I want to save it to my desktop. Click Save. We can minimize, once it's saved, we can minimize Fusion, and we can look on my incredibly messy desktop with all the icons, which I should be cleaning up, and see where it went. And where did it go? Paperclip Cup 2 version 1 right there. Let's double click it. Let's let it start in Cura, and let's take a look and see what it looks like in Cura. And while Cura is loading, let's talk about what we're going to print it out of. Of course, my first thought was to print it out of some cheap and colorful PLA, which I have tons of floating around here, especially the ones with this kind of thing is what I go after, those spools that don't really have enough to print it, much of anything on it, but I don't want to throw away because there's still a couple of, there's still 50, 60 wraps on it. So, but then I thought, well, I'm going to be jamming that top part down in, and PLA doesn't have a lot of flex to it before it cracks. So my next thought was TPU, and I thought, maybe 2 millimeters thick, that's going to be a lot of flex. So I decided to go ahead and use the Pryline PETG. I have 2 rolls of it in black. I've used it for a number of different things, and I seem to get pretty good results with it. Also, a couple people have asked me recently what my settings are for PETG because they're having some issues with it. And I did when I started, and I just kept tweaking settings until it went away. And I've shared my settings with some of you who still say they're having trouble. So let's do it in PETG. I think it will work good, and maybe we can solve some problems along the way. So in Cura, up here I'm set to my PETG. Is that my current favorite one? No, I have a new one, don't I? No, I don't. I thought I had a new one, but I must have deleted the old one and renamed it. So, as you can see, I'm using 0.2 layer height, 0.5 wall width. I'm going to use a wall thickness of 1 millimeter. I have 3 top layers, 3 bottom layers. Um, if you want these settings, let me know and I will post the profile. I'll post the profile anyway. I'm using 20% infill. I'm using a grid pattern. The infill doesn't really matter because the walls are so thin. It's going to be solid anyway. So as you can see, the 235-degree print temperature. I was using a build temperature higher than 50. I've started with 90 and backed off to 70, and since then I've backed off to 50. And to be honest, I haven't noticed any difference at all. 50 seems to be the go-to for glass and hairspray. It lets things adhere really well and cools fairly quickly, and the part just pops right off. Sometimes I'll hear a crack, and I'll look over and the part has actually popped off and has turned slightly sideways. I've got retraction on for PETG. All the rest of it's pretty normal. I've lowered the print speed a little to 50 and 50 and wall speed at 25. And one of the things I've done, I was having some kind of problem a while back, is I lowered the acceleration and the jerk down, and I have found that it really makes the printer run smoother and sound smoother, and I don't get layer shifting. That was the problem I was having. On real small parts where the printer was jerking back and forth really quick, I was getting some weird layer shifting. I changed these settings and it went away and has never been back, and I like the way the printer runs and sounds. I'm using print cooling on the second layer, running 80% fan speed, and the only reason I run 80% is because it's quieter, and I found that fans last longer if you back them off of 100%. Skirt, 3 lines, all that. Let's click prepare. And this part's going to take 2 hours and 20 minutes to print. I already have one done, so I'm going to switch back to the web camera and show it to you, and we're going to see how it works. Okay, here we are. Here is our final part, and I don't know if you can see it, how clearly it's coming out in the camera, but it would be black, of course, but it printed quite nicely. I have not cleaned it up a bit. This is exactly how it came off the printer. And you see my nice fillet on the bottom that I like. And I got nice smooth walls. I've got the Z-Hop all on one side, so I get a seam. I find I like the seam. I prefer the seam rather than Z-Hop being spread as little dots all over it. And yeah, let's see how our other part fits in it. A nice snug fit. There we go, down flush. I got a nice smooth transition from one to the other. Don't have a big gap. And now I have a functional paperclip cup again and dispenser. That's probably, if I filled that up, that's probably more paper clips than I'd use in the entire rest of my life. I have fully dedicated myself to as few of papers as possible. So paper clips are pokey things to me, not actual paper holders. So we are going to continue with this series of videos, and I am going to get more and more complex with what I design and make, and I'm going to take you through the original design process all the way through to the finish. My wife needs a visor clip on her Cadillac, and the only way to get it is to buy the entire visor for 135 bucks, which is ridiculous because it's a little plastic piece with 3 holes in it. It's absurd. So we're going to make one of those. My Jeep needs a little plastic end for one of the cables that connects up to the throttle body. Probably it's the one coming from the transmission, the kick down cable, or one of the cables the transmission uses to know where the throttle position is. And you got to buy the whole cable for 100 bucks, and it looks like about a 3-hour job to replace that, all for the little plastic end that snaps onto the throttle body. So we're going to make one of those. And I got a couple other pieces in mind along with the ladder feet I'm still testing. So stay tuned. We are going to make useful things, and we're going to see how they're designed and made, or at least how I design them and make them. And we'll see how durable they are as well, and we'll print them in different types of filament. If I've helped you, don't forget to like and subscribe. I've got some affiliate links below if you're in the market for a printer or other item from GearBest that won't cost you anything more and helps me out a little bit. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time. Bye now.